Hey everyone, it's time for another 3 at 3 on solar PV. We take 3 topics and talk about them for 3 minutes each. I'm Jenn Runyon, Chief Editor of Renewable Energy World.
And I'm Paula Mintz, Chief Market Research Analyst, SPV Market Research.
Awesome. All right, cool. So 3 at 3 topics today are global tariffs, do they work? Manufacturing and solar PV prices. And we're going to talk about some policy in Florida. So let's start with global tariffs. Paula, start with you had an interesting talk yesterday.
I had an interesting talk and a very long day trip to Houston to talk to the Steel Tube Industry, or rather association or industry. And they provide components for our utility scale, solar installations, whatever utility scale means, and also to wind, etc. So they're being affected, and they've filed suits federally. They're being affected by inexpensive imports from China. And they're losing into the solar industry. They have said they have proof that this is dumping, and so they were really interested to hear me talk about our tariff situation, also the minimum price situation in Europe. And I brought up several things. I said, number one, governments often meddle both on the incentive side and on the tariff side and on the punitive side in industries when they really don't understand the market forces at work and the personality of the industry, the behavior, what drives it, how these different global markets are interacting. And the examples I made were, number one, India. India filed a tariff suit against the U.S. The U.S. solar modules. U.S. is 2% of global manufacturing. Can't fulfill our own demand. Can't fulfill their demand. Did they do any good? No, they're filled up with Chinese product. Europe, minimum price levels. Well, those are easily gotten around. Manufacturers just ship into the country. Either they ship a product from China to Malaysia and then into Europe and avoid it.
Yeah.
Or they just ship in at the minimum price level and then either do either refund part of the money or include free inverters, etc. Did the MIP work, minimum prices? No. And in the U.S., the tariffs, it's meant to kickstart U.S. manufacturing, which is already, almost nothing. And what happened is, I think the average tariff is 12 cents apply. I mean, that's really very vague, so don't use that as an exact. So all that happens is in a country that can manipulate its currency, that has different high levels of subsidization, different focus on profit, different goals for margins, they just ship it in at under the tariff and then add the 12 cents and everything's fine.
Right. Yeah. I mean, so tariffs don't work. So that's the point.
Yeah, my point is any kind of government interaction, either on the positive and the negative side, really needs to have a fulsome understanding of the industry that it's trying to manipulate before it tries to manipulate it. And no matter what, there are going to be after effects that you did not expect.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and that's what, I know Renewable Energy World reported about that a lot when the tariffs were first instituted. Exactly. We said that people are just going to go around it. Here's what's going to happen. I do remember speaking to quite a few experts who had all of those same opinions. And so what you're saying is, yes, that was all true, and that's exactly what happened.
Right.
But so what do you do? How do you have a global market? Can you?
Unfortunately, the outcome of having a global market, and I'm not saying good or bad on this, is that every country has different, there's different political systems, there's different, particularly in China, it's not a democracy, different ways to manipulate currency, et cetera, different levels of demand. Different ways of incentivizing things. So unfortunately, once you have a global market with open borders, and I'm not trying to get into a trade deal discussion here, although it's valid, stuff like this is going to happen. And this in specific goes back to when Europe was 80% of the market and the Chinese industry was built to fulfill that market.
Right.
That was not dumping. That was aggressive pricing. Got into this discussion with the poor Steel Tube guys yesterday, and in the U.S. it was also not dumping. Not by the technical description of dumping. So when markets meddle, there's just you're going to have unintended outcomes, and there's just no way around it. And unfortunately, I don't see that market meddling actually does any good.
Interesting. So, I mean, we have to wrap up on this topic, but what was the takeaway for the steel industry, the people you were talking to? Do you think were encouraged, or are they still excited about their tariffs, or do they want to maybe stop the battle?
The steel tube industry? Well, or association, they were saddened. I mean, basically, they're trying to sell it. So their focus, and the reason I was there, is first of all, they're being undercut. And the way I explained it to them is this: developers, et cetera, in this country, they're bidding so low, the margins are so tight on PPAs. Someone's making money, but still, margins are so low that they're encouraged to buy the least expensive components they can. So that's going to favor China, even if they know better, even if some part of think they might be lower quality, they're still encouraged to buy the lowest possible. And so when you're selling into that market, you have to be aware of the margins, and unfortunately, you're going to be competing on price.
Yeah. Okay.
All through the room.
Okay, let's move on to pricing then. So what are these low prices doing to the manufacturers? I mean, are we going to start seeing some consolidation? I cannot remember the company, and that's bad, but I have seen lots of lowered guidance and, a little bit of fear.
Well, I don't blame them, and I'm not going to name a company in specific. It's a company that had started. It was a startup, and they were developing an N-type cell. Mm-hmm. They were not commercial. So on one hand, it's offering some companies who were not commercial yet and having some problems getting to the point of commercial viability. It's giving them some cover. So essentially, there's the PR thing. I have an article that I'm talking about PR-driven news on Friday.
Right.
And but basically, this company was not commercial. Has a little bit of cover now. They can announce we've had to withdraw from the market. It's because of the low prices, but they were not in the market. It could provide some cover for Solar City and its Salevo if they want to say, it's not the right time to enter. Mm-hmm. And for companies like First Solar, who announced just a few months ago they wanted to be competing on price, be competing with modules now, and their costs were low enough. Prices now for crystalline are below the cost of producing for solar. Bad timing. Yeah. You have companies like SunPower with their, they can't compete on this level. Solar World. Without, and this is, we've discussed it before, this is because of change in the, government's view in China of how much they want installed. Well, actually trying to control their market, stranded all this inventory. Prices are tumbling almost on a daily level. Now, this is not a mature enough market to have a spot market, by the way.
Right.
And so electricity is the commodity for which there's a spot market, not the panel. But boy, does this look like one when it tumbles like this. Actually, isn't the way a spot market is, but to people who don't want to get into the wonky definition of the spot market, you're just talking a slide down that is causing a squeeze to true commercial manufacturers of modules and cells. And it is going to lead to layoffs. Just if it continues, it will lead to layoffs, and it will lead to shutdowns. It will lead to consolidation again. And it's really sad. We lose a lot of innovation and true talent this way.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Well, that's a shame. Not good in the market. Let's move on to something else that's an interesting discussion about Florida. The state of Florida has a ballot initiative, or it's amendment number 1 for when they vote. And the amendment is written so that it sounds like if you are in favor of it, you are in favor of solar in the state of Florida. However, when the solar industry has dug into this amendment, it's very clear that this is an amendment that's going to stop third-party solar, and it's going to, really keep utilities in control of the electricity market, period. People will not be able to sell their own power, electricity, and I don't know all the specs, but it leaves it wide open for utilities to maintain control and third parties to not be allowed to enter the state. So people are confused. And the message now, the solar industry is working really hard to get out in Florida and explain to people what this amendment really says and how they should vote against it, vote no on one. That's the message. Al Gore was in the state talking about how important it is to get out and vote, especially in Florida. Yep. Right. So it's interesting how, who is really writing your amendments that you're voting for. And it's important that people really pay attention to that.
Yeah, so many examples, so many, and unsurprising that it comes, sorry, Florida, from the hanging Chad state. This is not new. This is not new. In California, when, over net metering 2.0, there was a lot of very confusing press that came from the utilities. I mean, they've been fighting back against states and essentially cities and counties going all renewables and pulling away from the investor-owned utilities. Marin a few years ago, PG&E was really up in arms against that. And, also you can look at the natural gas industry with their relatively clean PR. It's very, very hard when you read these things, and they're written so cleverly and so well to sound like you're voting for one thing when it really means something else. And then, I get your point. It's really important to look back and say, who is really in charge of this amendment and what do they want? And that may be the thing to do. It saddens me because Florida, with so much sun, should be a state where solar is doing very well,
right.
And yet it never has. And this is a perfect example of the supposedly friendly to solar utilities that are not.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Massachusetts, tiny Massachusetts, installed as much solar last year as Florida did in its entire history.
Oh, no.
Anyway, enough said. The market is not good in Florida. If you live in Florida, go out and vote against Amendment 1.
Yeah, and the point again is to really, we in the renewable industry and me in the entirely 100% solar industry, we really need to engage our end users and our customers so that when these things come up on a ballot, they truly understand what's really written there and the effect it can have on them.
Yeah.
And so, and this is all across the country. Investor-owned utilities trying to affect, and they're not evil, right? They think it's in their best interest, and they've convinced themselves it's in ours. Trying to manipulate the vote by writing very confusing
pieces of legislation. Yeah. Okay, so we have to wrap up here, but we did get a very interesting letter this week from a listener who is urging us to discuss the value of solar. He made a point that there are some auxiliary components to solar generation that really help understand the true value of solar and that people are overlooking. So we're going to dig into that a little bit. We thank him so much for his comment, and we encourage others to leave us comments, let us know, send us emails. What would you like us to discuss?
And tune in, because we're going to talk about it, believe it or not, from the utility viewpoint and the solar industry viewpoint.
That's right. Right. All right. Well, that's it for 3 at 3 on Solar PV. Thanks,
All
everyone.
right, bye.
Bye-bye.